शारदावा नललितलोका त्रिनयकारुण्यगणगणात्वम् प्रप्तस्य कल्याणगुणानवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् महाप्रभु कीर्तन नित्य गीता वादित्रमाद्यान् मनसुरसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पाशतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् 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 श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्तिरमजनादो तस्य भक्तां शनियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसादो स्वादनतृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गम् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्नाम् प्रतिक्षणा स्वातनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् निकुञ्जयूनो रतिकेलिसेदै यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रादिदाक्षाततिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् साक्षादरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रैः उक्तस्तथा भायत एव सद्भिः किन्तु प्रभुर्या प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि दायं स्तुवं तस्य यस्य स्त्रीसन्ध्या वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमति भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य नित्यानंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि ಶಿವಸದಿ ಗೌರ ಭಕ್ತರಿಂದ जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौर भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav, Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadramay. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha. Jaya Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita, Jaya Gauranita. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Namaste Narasimhaya Praladaladaine Hiranyakashipurvakshaha Shilatan khana khalae Hito narsimha parto narsimha Yato yato yami tato narsimha Bahir narsimha hridaye narsimha Narsimha madim sharanam prapade Tava kara kamalvare nakam adbhuta shringam dalita hiranyakashipu tanubringam keshavadhirta narhari rupa jai jagadish hare Jai Jagadish Hare Jai Jagadish Hare केशव धीरता नर हरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जयो नरसिंहदेव जयो नरसिंहदेव जयो नरसिंहदेव जयो नरसिंहदेव जयो भक्त प्रहलाद जयो भक्त प्रहलाद जयो भक्त प्रहलाद जयो प्रहलाद महाराज जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद नरसिंह देव भगवान की प्रहलाद महाराज की जय गौर प्रेमानंदे
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषी ये तुम्हारा शरण लो तरा वंच पूर्ण हो ये तुम्हारा शरण लो तरा वंच पूर्ण हो कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावनवासी कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावनवासी मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास विलास कुंज दियो वा नयने हेरिबो सदा युगल रूपरासे नयने हेरि सदा युगल रूपरासे ये निवेदन धरो सखीरनुगत करो 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 सेवा आदि कर दिए करो निज दासी आदि करो दिए करो निज दासी सेवा आदि करो दिए करो निज दासी आदि करो दिए करो निज दासी बिना कृष्ण दासे को ये न मोरा हो कृष्ण दासे को ये न मोरा हो श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः यानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे निकानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे यानि कानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे निकानि पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. वृंदादेव तुलसी महारानी की जय. वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. वृंदाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. वृंदादेव तुलसी महारानी की जय.
cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years, and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtana moment is a prime benediction for humanity at large, because it reflects the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which you are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate to that have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O son of Maharashananda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And when will the heads of my body stand on at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation and considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so beneath me and gilds me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worship Lord, unconditionally. Chaitanya Satakam Ki Jai. Put together from it. Namaste Saraswati. Sri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanachalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yutapadakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitam Cha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschasya Desatarini Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namini Sri Varshabhanavi Devi Dayataya Krupabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnanadayini Prabhave Namaha Madhurojvala Premaja Sri Rupanuga Bhaktida गौरशक्ति विग्रहाय नमोस्तुते नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्रीमूर्तये दिनतारिणि रूपनुगा विरूपा सिद्धांत द्वंद्वहारिणि नमो गौरकिशोराय साक्षात् वैराग्यमूर्तये विप्रलम्बा रसंबोधे पदंबुजयते नमः नमो भक्तिविनोदाय सच्चिदानन्दनामिने गौरशक्ति स्वरूपाय रूपनुगावरायते गौरविर्भवभूमेस्त्वं निर्देस्त सज्जना प्रिय वैष्णव सर्वभूमा श्रीजगन्नाथाय ते नमः वाञ्छाकल्पातरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनाम्ने गौरे तुषे नमः पञ्चतत्त्वकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपास्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्ता राधाकान्ता नमोऽस्तुते जयतं सुरतौ पङ्गोर्मम मन्दमतेर्गति मत्सर्वस्वपदम्बोजौ राधामदनमोहनौ दिव्याद्वृन्दारण्या कल्पाद्रुमुदा श्रीमद्रत्नागरा सिंहासनास्तौ श्रीमद्राधाशीलगोविन्ददेवो प्रेस्ताल्भी सेम्यमानौ सुरामि श्रीमान् रसरसरम्भी वंशीवततस्थिता कर्षन्वेणुस्वनैर्गोपीर्गोपीनादाश्रियेस्तु न तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधारा श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। श्री ब्रह्म संहिता प्रेयर्स की जय। परमा कृष्ण सच्चिदानंद विग्रह अनादिर आदिर गोविंद सर्व कारण कारणम चिन्तामणि प्रकार सद्मसुकल्पवृक्ष लक्षावृतेषु सुरभिरभिपालयन्तं लक्ष्मीसहस्रशता सम्भ्रमं सेव्यमानं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि वेणुं क्वनन्तम् अरविन्ददलाय तक्षं परभावतं संसारभूतसुन्दराङ्गं कर्णर्पकोटिकमनीयविशेषशोभं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि अलोलचन्द्रकलशाद्वनमाल्यवंशी रत्नागदं प्रणयकेलिकलाविलासं श्यामं त्रिभङ्गललितं नियताप्रकाशं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि अञ्जनीयस्य सकलेन्द्रियवृत्तिमन्ति पश्यन्ति पन्ति कलयन्ति चिरं जगन्ति आनन्दचिन्मयसदुज्ज्वलविग्रहस्य गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि अद्वैतमच्युतमनादिमनन्तरूपम् आद्यं पुराणपुरुषं च सुलभम् अदुर्लभम् आत्मभक्तौ गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि पन्तस्तु कोटिशतवत्सरसम्प्रगम्यो वायोरथापि मनसो मुनिपुङ्गवानां सोऽप्यास्थिति यत्प्रपदचिन्निविच्य तत्त्वे गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि एकोऽपि असौ रचयितं जगदन्धकोटिं यक्षतिरस्ति जगदन्धस्याद्यन्तः अन्तन्तरस्तः परमाणुश्चयन्तरस्तं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि यद्भावभवितधियो मनुजास्तथैव सम्प्राप्य स्वरूपमहिषास्त्रयानुभूषः सुप्तैर्यम्येव निगमाप्रतिष्ठितस्तुवन्ति गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि आनन्दचिन्मयरसप्रतिभावतीभिस्ताभिर्यैव निजपरार्पणकलाभिः लोक एव निवसति अखिल पुरुषं तमहं भजामि प्रेमाञ्जनचुरितभक्तिविलोचनेन सन्ता सदैव हृदयेषु विलोकयन्ति यं श्यामसुन्दरमचिन्त्यगुणस्वरूपं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि रमदीमूर्तिषु कलानियमेन स्तिष्ठान् नानावतारमकरोद्भुवनेषु किन्तु कृष्णा स्वयं सम्भवत्परमाः पुमान्यो गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि Translation.
Okay. I wish it.
Start.
Huh?
Translation should start.
English.
Yes. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin. He is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis and Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is eternally playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with a figure of beauty tinged with hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of people. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with a moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shyamasundara is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss through its substantiality, and his thirst full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of the transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, who is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning, and the eternal Purusha. Yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama for drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and in the same time. Such is the primeval Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveniences, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shyamasundara, Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion tinged with salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Narsimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portions.
Shrimad Bhagavatam, Dr. Raj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharani Devi Sesa Sunyavadi Paskati Dasta. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so today we're going to first do our summary of what we've covered so far and then go forward. So, right from the first verse, the questions are asked. What is Prakriti, meaning the material nature? What is Purusha, the enjoyer? So, Prakriti, or the material nature, means there are 24 elements making up the material body, and which are what you would call the material elements of nature. And then Purusha means the enjoyer. There are two enjoyers, the Jiva, or the individual soul, and Paramatma. Jiva is the false enjoyer, and Paramatma is the real enjoyer. What is Kshetra, or the field of activity? It's the body for the Jiva. In other words, the Jiva only knows its own body. It doesn't know anything about anybody else's body. Whereas the super soul knows all bodies, because he's present in the heart of every living entity and also in every atom of the universe. And then, what is a Chitra Gyam? The knower of the field. Well, the knower of the field, or one who knows the body, means, again, you have two knowers, the Jiva and the Paramatma. Jiva is the individual knower, and Paramatma is the all-present knower in every body and every atom. And then Gayam, what is the object of knowledge? And what is the goal of knowledge? So, the Gayam, the object of knowledge, the 24 types of aspects of real knowledge explained in this chapter, the 8th to 12th verse, and 8th to 11th verse, and then okay, so Gaya means the object of knowledge. That is to know these 20 points of real knowledge. And the goal of knowledge is Krishna. Okay, so the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita explain the knower of the body, or the Jiva, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead
and that is by surrendering to the Lord. Then the middle 6 chapters, Bhagavad Gita, explain the relationship between the individual soul, or the jiva, and the super soul. And it points to devotional service as being the means to understand. And then the last 6 chapters explains a lot of supplementary things, but especially the pure devotional service, attaining absolute love for the Lord. Okay, so when we start talking about the 24 material elements, first it talks about 8. Bhumirapo nalo vayukam mano buddhirevacha ahankara ityam me binapaktirastata. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. Those are the gross mahabhutas, great elements. And then there is the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Now those 8 are further expanded into 24. And that is explained in the 5th and 6th and 7th chapter, verses of chapter 13. So, how do we get 24? Well, you have the 5 mahabhutas, great material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then you have the 5 senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. And then you have the 5 objects of the senses, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. And then you have the 5 working senses, the speech, the hands, legs, anus, and the genital. And then you have the 3 subtle senses, mind, intelligence, false ego. So now we're at 23. And number 4 is called pradhana, the unmanifest state of material nature in which the modes of material nature are not working and the time element is not acting. And then when the time element begins to act and then the modes of material nature begin to function, it becomes the Mahatattva, the total of the material elements, all 24, become manifest and are working. And then we have what's called the 20 points of knowledge. That's verses 8 to 12. 8 to 12, I'm sorry, yeah. So, beginning with Aman Fun, which means humility, the number 1 point, and going through to Maichananya Yogena Bhaktir Avyabhicharine, that is surrendering completely and engaging in the devotional service of the Lord. Then to, at the end, Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam, having a philosophical search for the absolute truth. So there are 20 points. Sometimes it's counted as 18, sometimes it's counted as 20, but it's usually 20 points. And this is what real knowledge is. And then it says, Etaj jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yad atonyata. Anything besides these 20 points, whatever they may be, is ignorance. So we can see that modern education is basically ignorance. None of these points are taught in the schools, beginning with humility. Although they might touch on it a little bit, but not that much. Okay, so then we come to text 13, where Krishna says, I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. So, whenever the word Brahman is used, its first and foremost meaning is spiritual. Then, there are 3 levels of Brahman. First is the entire material creation. Second is the Brahma Jyoti. And third is the Jiva and the Paramatma. And ultimately, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you have these 3 levels of Brahman. And you have to understand which Brahman is being spoken about by the context of the verse. But the full concept of Brahman includes the material nature, the Jiva, and Krishna, the Jiva, the Paramatma, and Krishna. That's the full concept of Brahman. Okay, so then, what is the knowable, and knowing which you will taste the eternal? Well, Geyam is the knowable, that is, you know about the soul and the supersoul, and the material nature, and the differences. And then you can taste the eternal Brahman, the spirit. Well, this is talking about Brahman Jiva. When we come to the next verse, text 15, now we're going to talk, text 14 talks about the Ananda Brahman, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So text 13 is Vijnana Brahman, the Jiva who was on the level of understanding the difference between the Jiva and the Supersoul, and the Jiva and material nature. But when you come to Ananda Brahman, that's uniquely Krishna and liberated souls in the spiritual world. Ananda Brahman means they are always experiencing unlimited transcendental ecstasies in loving devotion. Okay, and therefore that verse says, everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the Supersoul exists, pervading everything. So, there's no doubt this is talking about the Supersoul. And it's explaining, because he's present in everyone's heart as Paramatma, in a and also he is the owner of the senses. Therefore, he has eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, everywhere in the universe in that way. Then text 15, the Super Soul is the original source of all senses. So there you are. He's the owner of the senses, right? He's the original source of all senses. Yet he is without senses. Okay, now here we're getting into mutually contradictory qualities of the Lord. This is what confuses the dumbbells, the people that eat meat and engage in illicit activities. They can't understand this because it sounds like double talk, but it's not. What it's saying is, he's the original source of all senses, so he owns all the senses of all the living entities. Yet he is without senses. Yeah, because his senses are not material. He has pure spiritual senses. We right now, our pure spiritual senses are covered by the gross body, so therefore the senses that we're using are contaminated. But it's possible to purify them through devotional service. Then your real senses will act. But right now we have contaminated senses. It's just like, let's say you're cutting your lawn with a lawnmower, and all of a sudden something gets stuck in it. So you turn it off and you try and look what it is. Ah, it's an old pair of scissors that you had dropped in the lawn months before previous spring. So you look at it and it's all rusty. So you say, well, maybe I can still use it. So you get some rust remover. You clean off all the rust. Fortunately, it's not been bent or broken by the lawnmower. And then it works like it did when it was new. So that's our situation. Our senses are all rusty and covered with material, mundane energy. But if we purify it, if we get a rust remover, take away all the rust on our senses, then they function as spiritual senses. Right now they're functioning through material, through matter, and therefore they're not functioning purely. Okay. So then we come to text 15. Yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. Now, you say, well, how's that possible? How can he be unattached if he's the maintainer of all living beings? Because I'm a maintainer of my family, and I'm attached. He's maintaining everybody. How can he be non-attached? Well, because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not like us. He can do his duty without attachment to the result. We can also attain that position if we follow Krishna consciousness sincerely. And he's the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature. Well, if I'm the master of, let's say, a company, but how can I be transcendental at the same time the master of the company? Because people get attached easily, just like Jeff Bezos. He's attached to being the CEO and one of the main stockholders of Amazon. So he's obviously very attached. But Krishna can be the maintainer of the whole universe, not only one universe. There are millions and billions of material universes. And he's maintaining all of them. But yet he's not attached. And he's completely engaged in his own pastimes in the spiritual world without being affected by whatever's happening in all those millions and billions of universes. So these are unique qualities of Krishna. And in the purport to this text 15, it says, Apani Pado Javanu Grahita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has no hands which are materially contaminated, but he has hands and accepts whatever sacrifice is offered to him. So he does have hands, but they're not hands like ours that are materially contaminated. His hands are completely pure. Therefore, he can stretch them as far as he wants and take anything and use it whatever way he wants. So he has these mutually contradictory qualities that no one else can emulate or in any way, let's say, have the same things. All right, so, and then when he appears, he doesn't appear in the material world. He appears within his own internal potency. So he's never really part of the material world. It's just like you get into a submarine and you go down to the bottom of the ocean. You're in the ocean, but you're protected by the submarine. So you're not really affected by the water. And by the way, unless you have a very, very powerful submarine, you would die if you go to the bottom of the ocean because of the weight of the water. It'd be very difficult to breathe. So you have to have a pressurized, let's say, environment in the submarine to permit you to breathe. If you're outside in the water, you would die almost immediately because of the pressure of the weight of the water. But there are so many animals, or not animals, but fish, even on the bottom of the ocean that live. So you can imagine how they have a body suitable to live underneath that all that pressure. You know, water is very heavy. It's heavier than oil. Right? But yet, there are different types of fish and crustaceans that live on the bottom of the ocean, even though it's so heavy with weight, and they perfectly function, even in darkness where there's no sunlight. They went 2 miles below the North Pole and it's discovered thousands of new species they had never seen before. You can look that up on the internet. They went 2 miles below the surface of the North Pole and they found a whole thousands of species they never knew existed before. That's why Prabhupada said they haven't even properly researched this earth and they're trying to go to the moon. See that? Yeah, what's it say? Take the microphone, read it.
Surprising animal discoveries under the ice of the Arctic Ocean.
Arctic Ocean. Antarctic or Arctic?
Arctic.
Yeah, that's the North Pole.
Yeah.
Antarctic is the South Pole.
The areas of the central Arctic Ocean are still poorly explored. Beneath the
You don't really know everything.
This article is February 21st, 2022, Maharaj. Last year.
Yeah.
Last year's.
Okay, hold the microphone to your mouth, please.
Beneath the pack ice, however, lies a far richer fauna than previously thought.
Fauna means living entities under the water.
The Mosaic expedition, which spent over a year in the Arctic Ocean, was a bit like the Starship Enterprise, set out to expand our knowledge of unknown regions. And on Earth, few things are more unknown than the central Arctic Ocean region. It was long believed that only a few organisms were found in the icy, dark depths of the central Arctic Ocean. But part of the expedition studied the fish and other animals in the region and made amazing discoveries.
Yeah, what's amazing is there's no light. There's no sunlight at that depth. But yet you have living entities somehow or other existing. And that means there's no light, there's very little or no oxygen, but yet they're existing. It's like a miracle.
Beneath the Arctic Ocean Park ice, not far from the geographic North Pole, the Mosaic expedition research group studying the habitat and animals beneath the park ice discovered a rich zooplankton community of crustaceans.
Okay, plankton and crustaceans. Crustaceans, they have hard external bones.
Oh. Jellyfish and
like shrimp and lobsters and things like that.
Okay. Jellyfish and comb jellyfish at depths of 100 to 600 meters. According to the results of the work, the zone with the plankton extends over the entire distance studied.
Plankton is like algae and things like that.
Studied no less than 3,170 kilometers.
What?
They studied entire distance studied not less than 3,170 kilometers.
Wow, it's a big area under the North Pole. Anything else?
No, Maharaj.
Okay,
so much
they're still discovering things. They haven't fully examined the Earth, and now they want to go to Mars or the Moon. It's completely crazy, full of nonsense. Okay, so then in text 16, chapter 13, text 16, and this is a review we're going over before we go forward. The supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, the moving and the non-moving, because he is subtle. He is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. So these are the mutual qualities that are contradictory. How can he be far away and very near at the same time? Well, he can. We can't. Therefore, unless we accept that God has transcendental and mystical properties that no one else has, and powers, if we don't accept that Krishna has mystical powers that are beyond the conception of anybody, we remain an atheist. So when you have people like Dr. Radhakrishnan, who's writing books about philosophy of Vedic philosophy, he's making many mistakes because he does not accept that God has inconceivable potencies. Like, for example, oftentimes you see these big books, Mahabharata. So, big, thick book like that, written by a person who's a mundaner. So, one time I was shocked. I read in the Mahabharata that when the sons of, these 60,000 sons of, I forget the name of the person, they were looking for the horse that had been stolen by Lord Indra, and he hid it in the underworld. You reach the underworld by going to the Bay of Bengal, and there's a certain place you can go down through the water, and you'll get to the underworld. There's another world, and it's populated, and it has civilization there. Of course, the scientists don't know this, but if you read the Vedas, you'll know that there is such a thing. So they saw these 60,000 sons, forget the sons of who, I'll think of it in a minute. They saw Kapila Muni, who's an incarnation of Krishna, meditating. And they saw the horse that had been stolen by Indra and hidden in the underworld, so no one could find it. And therefore, it was necessary to get that horse to continue the horse sacrifice. Right? So it says, when these 60,000 boys saw it, they became very angry, and they were running toward Kapila Muni and to overwhelm him and capture the horse. But it says, then Kapila Muni was meditating, but he opened his eyes, and immediately fire came out of his eyes and burned the 60,000 boys to ashes. Now, if you read the same episode in the Bhagavatam, it says that Lord Kapila is completely transcendental. He didn't get angry. He didn't burn them to death. It was the anger of those 60,000 boys toward the Lord that caused their bodies to catch fire and burn. Because Lord Kapila is transcendental. He doesn't get angry and burn anybody. But, Lord Shiva might do that, but not an incarnation of Krishna. So here was, the Bhagavatam has its Mahabharata also, or parts of the Mahabharata, and the Mahabharata translated by a mundane person who uses logic rather than Shastra to understand what's being said, so he can translate it. Right? He used his logic and said, well, it must have been Kapila Muni who burned the boys because he got angry seeing them running toward him. But no, it was the anger of those boys And because they could not project it onto Kapila Muni, it bounced back on them and burned them. So here you see the difference between translation by a genuine Shastric devotee and a translation by a mundane person who uses logic rather than Shastra to understand the Shastra. So that was an eye-opener for me. And there are many, many, many instances like that where a mundane person will translate Shastra and use mundane logic to understand things and ignore the Shastric evidence because they think the Shastric evidence is either bogus or an exaggeration. Why? Because ultimately it's because they don't accept that God has unlimited potencies. Okay, then we come to text number 17. And these are all things that we've discussed. I'm doing a review before we go forward. Although the Supersoul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all. So Krishna is going to devour everything, and he's going to expand everything. And he, although he has millions and billions of expansions, plenary expansions, partial plenary expansions of himself as Narayana, as incarnations, etc., still he's one. He's not divided, or he doesn't lose his original identity. And then text 18, which was a very important verse, it explains what is Jnanam, Gyayam, and Jnanagam. Jnanam is knowledge, Gyayam is the object of knowledge, and Jnanagam is the goal of knowledge. So what is knowledge? That's the 20 points of knowledge from verses 8 to 12 in this chapter. What is Gyayam? That is the object of knowledge. That's the 20 points. Jnanam is knowledge in general. Gyayam are the 20 points of knowledge. And Jnanagam is the goal of knowledge, or Krishna. And then it says, he's the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. And then text 19, Krishna explains, thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable, meaning the Jiva and Supersoul and Krishna, have been summarily described by me. Only my devotee can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. Because a devotee is someone who's actually surrendered to a bona fide spiritual master and who is capable of understanding this transcendental knowledge because of purification through devotional service. Okay, then we begin this new section which explains that material nature and living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations in the modes of matter are products of material nature. And then Karya Karana Kartritve, nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. So if we're suffering, it's because we made mistakes. It's not because God likes to see us suffer. Right? Okay, so then we'll do one verse, and then I want to give you the proof that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purusham pakriti stohi bhukte pakriti jan gunam karanam gunasangasya satasadyoni janmasu. Text 22. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. So, if we associate with the material nature, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending for sense gratification, we get zapped by karma. And, getting angry and using bad language and eating junk things and having so many desires for sense gratification, we get contaminated. So that's what happens when you go to public schools. You get contaminated. You're associating with people. That's what happens. Even if you go to work, you're going to get contaminated by this bad association. Unless you are doing everything for Krishna. At that point, even though you're in the material nature, you're not getting contaminated, because every purpose that you have is to please Guru and Krishna by your activities, your work. So then it's possible not to be contaminated. But if you're not educated properly and you don't have bona fide Guru, it's very easy to be contaminated. And what's the proof that someone is contaminated? They use bad language. They are very abusive. They are negative. They're not positive. They always see the cup as half empty, not half full. They always see the negative things in life. Those are contaminated people. And that's like almost everybody. Right? There's even devotees like that are always using harsh language and demeaning people and gossiping, always talking nonsense, right? So it doesn't matter if they're initiated. If they're acting like that, that means they're contaminated. And you should avoid association with devotees who are contaminated. Only associate with genuine devotees who are always positive, who are always talking about Krishna, who are not interested in, how can we make more money, right? Or how can we, what's the best stock to buy, or how can I invest here or invest there? Those are personal decisions you have to take, but you don't have to talk about it. We should talk about Krishna rather than, what stock I'm going to invest in. So many times I've asked the kids when they used to come to class, what are your colleagues in school talking about? And they say, well, they talk about the internet, and they talk about vacation, and they talk about boys and girls, and sports and movies. Is there anything about Krishna? No. You see, that means they're contaminated, and they're not going to get free of it unless they come to class, listen. The way to become purified is by listening to bona fide devotees speaking about Krishna and hearing bona fide statements made by Prabhupada and the Acharyas. Okay, so your homework for tomorrow, you read the purport to this 13th chapter, 22nd verse. Prabhupada says, this verse is very important for an understanding of how the living entities transmigrate from one body to another. This is a very important point. So you read this purport, and we'll discuss it tomorrow. So now I'm going to show you proof that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We'll begin with the Vishnu Sastra. Well, we'll begin with what's called the Kali Santaranya Upanishad. So Upanishads are the highest authority in Vedic philosophy. And there's a verse from the Kali Santaranya Upanishad. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Iti Sudasakam Nam, Kali Kalma Sanasanam, Nata Parataropaya Sarva Vedesu Dristyate. After searching through all the Vedic literature, one cannot find a method of religion more sublime for this age than the chanting of Hare Krishna. There you are, right in the Kali Santaranya Upanishad, one of the 108 Upanishads. That is irrevocable, irrefutable evidence, not only of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, but of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Okay. And now, who's chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra? Who brought the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra into the material world? Lord Chaitanya. It was existing before, but he made it prominent because it's in the Kali Santaranya Upanishad. So it was there already, but he made it prominent and essential. And then the Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram, Suvarna Varno Hemango Varanga Chandanan Gadi Sanyasa Krich Chama Santo Nishta Santi Parayana. So that is verse in the Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram. I don't know which one. I didn't have time to look it up, but it's definitely a verse. And it says, in his early pastimes, he appears as a householder with a golden complexion. His limbs are beautiful, and his body smeared with the pulp of sandalwood seems like molten gold. In his later pastimes, he accepts the sannyasa order, and he is equipoised and peaceful. He is the highest abode of peace and devotion, for he silences the impersonalist non-devotees. Haribol. That's a description of Lord Chaitanya. Look it up right now. Just type in Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram, Suvarna, Suvarna, Varno, Varno, Hemango, Hamango. It should be able to show you which verse it is in the Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram. Look.
79.
79.
Shloka 79.
Sloka 79. There it is.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen. This is Lord Chaitanya in the Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram. And then in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.32. Krishna Varnyam Trisak Krishnam Sangapangastrabarsadam Yajnai Sankirtana Parayar Yajanti Hi Sumedasa. So first, the Kali Santaranya Upanishad. It gives you the Hare Krishna Mahamantra since the most ancient time. But the direct evidence is verse number 79. Is that it?
Yeah, 79.
The Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram, which is in the Mahabharata and the Dana Dharma Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram. And I'm not going to read all this. And then you have the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 5th chapter, 32nd verse. Krishna Varnam Chisak Krishnam. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the name of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. There it is. And he's also in the Brahma Samhita. I didn't have time to get that. I'll tell you what that is tomorrow. So you have Srimad Bhagavatam, you have Vishnu Sahasranam Sutram, you have Brahma Samhita, and then you have other references, but they're mostly books that were written by the six Goswamis. I mean, they're also Shastra, but the nonsense Brahmins wouldn't accept them. So it says here, Adi Lila, chapter 3, verse number 84. Srimad Bhagavatam, the Mahabharata, the Puranas, and other Vedic literatures all give evidence to prove that Lord Sri Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is the incarnation of Krishna. So this is all in Adi Lila, chapter 3 of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, so we'll stop right there and continue tomorrow. You have very simple homework. Read the purport to the verse 13th chapter, verse 22. Haribo, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yes.
I think some devotee friends of Vaishnavas. They have there is a blog written about scriptural references to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being avatar of Krishna, and it has a lot of references like Atharva Veda,
Right.
then Sama Veda, then Krishna Upanishad, then the one that we just saw, Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.32. Then in the also seventh canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it describes one of the incarnations.
Right.
And then Kurma Purana, Garuda Purana. Yeah, I'll send this, Maharaj.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Wow. So there's a lot of references. Devi Purana, Narasimha Purana, Padma Purana, Narada Purana, Bhavishya Purana, and then Matsya Purana. So they've taken all Puranas. Vamana Purana, Vayu Purana, and Ananta Samhita, Urdhvamanya Tantra, Brahma Yamala. Yeah, there's so many, Maharaj. Ananta Samhita, Krishna Yamala, Jaimini Bharata, Yoga Vasishta, Skanda Purana, Kapila Tantra. This seems like a very comprehensive one.
Yeah, that's why it says here in verse 84, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Mahabharata, the Puranas, and other Vedic literatures all give evidence to prove that Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the incarnation of Krishna. Good. Any questions? You can see how profound this 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is. If you learn it, and you'll avoid a lot of confusion. But if you just read it on your own, you probably wouldn't understand much. You'll understand 20 points of knowledge, but all the other stuff, you know what the words mean, but actually what they mean, not sure. So that's why we're going over this chapter very carefully. And then we'll go back to Srimad Bhagavatam. All right, no questions, no answers. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So read that purport very carefully. In that purport it says, the living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature. There you go. Solution to all problems of life. She wants to say.
I'm just setting up.
It's there also.
Okay, yeah, this is closer.
If you want to play Kartal.
Shri Guru Charana Padma. Oh, sorry.
You can chant Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hello. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hari Bol.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hari Bol.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hari Bol.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hari Bol.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Guru.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Bandho mui savadhana mate
Bandhamui Savadana Mate
Jahara prasade bhai e bhavatoriya jai
Janara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai
Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoyte
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte te koriya aikya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittete Koriya Aikya
Arana kori ho mane asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane rati aise uttama gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttamagati
Jai prasad pure sarva asha
Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asa
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
Shakshutsan Lila Jai Janame Janme Prabhu Se
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
Divya Gyan De Prakashito
प्रेम भक्ति जहा होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasha Jate
वेदे गाय जहर चरितो
Vede Gai Janara Charito
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनारा बंधु
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu
लोकनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
Lokanath Lokera Jivana
हा हा प्रभु कोरो दोया देहो मोरे पादा छाया
Aha Prabhu Kuradoya Deha More Kadachaya
ए बेजास गुशुक त्रिभुवाना
Eveyas Gusachibhavana
शिला प्रभुपाद पतित पवाना
Prabhupada Patita Pavana
जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा
Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada
जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा
Jaya Gurudeva 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 Jaya Gurudeva
नमो विष्णुपदाय
Haribo
कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्य नामिने
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya
Chaitanya
Prabhu Nityananda
Nityananda
Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri
Nityan
Advaita Gadadara Srivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna
Haribo
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Hare
Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Nittai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nittai Gaura Hari Bol
His Divine Grace is Sri Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Danta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Namacharya Siddhartha Thakur ki jai, Prime Minister Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Vaiti Gadadhar, Sri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Radha Giri Gurdhan ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanand. All glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious to Srila Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glorious to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great honor. By his grace,
Grace when we cross the ocean of material suffering, obtain the mercy of Krishna. My
Not only
only
wish
wish
to have my
is to have my consciousness
consciousness
purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth.
attachment
To his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He
opens
opened my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Lokanatha
O Master,
Goswami,
be merciful unto us.
merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds.
We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada
Prabhupada
ki
ki
jai.
jai.
Nama Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desa